While repairing my car, the mechanic suddenly turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost, and whispered, "Don't get behind the wheel, it's a trap." At that moment, I received a message from my son. "Dad, hurry up." You won't believe what my son had in mind. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The phone rang at 5:15 on a Monday in early March. I'd been sitting in my living room for the better part of an hour, watching the light fade through the window, listening to the refrigerator hum its lonely song in the kitchen. 3 months. That's how long it had been since Glenn walked out of this house, since his fist made the kitchen table jump hard enough to rattle the salt shaker, since Maud's cold eyes followed me to the door like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. When his name appeared on the screen, my heart kicked against my ribs like something trapped. "Dad?" His voice came through warm, almost apologetic, softer than I'd heard it in years. "Maud and I have been talking. We miss you. Come for dinner tonight. She's making pot roast, your favorite. The one with those little potatoes you like." I should have been skeptical. Any reasonable person would have been. But I wasn't reasonable in that moment. I was just a 63-year-old man tired of the silence. Tired of eating frozen dinners alone at a table meant for four back when Sarah was alive. When Glenn was young and still looked at me like I knew things worth knowing, like I was someone worth respecting. "I'd love that, son," I said, maybe too quickly, too eagerly. "What time should I be there?" "7 sharp. Don't be late. Everything will be ready and waiting for you." After we hung up, I sat there holding the phone in both hands, feeling something like relief wash through me in waves. My chest felt lighter than it had in months. Then the memory surfaced, sharp and uninvited. Glenn's face gone red, veins standing out in his neck, spit flying when he shouted, $35,000. That's nothing to you. You're sitting on retirement accounts, and the house and everything, and I'm your son." His voice had been raw, desperate, edged with something uglier. "I'm drowning here, and you're hoarding money like some miserable old man." I'd stayed calm. Decades of auditing state budgets taught me that. How to keep my face neutral when someone was lying to me, stealing, cooking the books. "Glenn, I can't hand over that kind of money for something you can't even explain clearly. You said investment opportunity, but you won't tell me what it is. If you need help, real help, let's sit down with actual numbers, real plans. I'm your son. That money will be mine someday anyway. Why not help me now when I actually need it?" That's what had made me go cold inside. Not the anger, but the entitlement. The assumption that my life, my savings, everything I'd worked for was just an inheritance he was waiting to collect. He'd stormed out, shoulder slamming the doorframe hard enough to leave a mark I still hadn't repaired. Maud had lingered in the doorway, her expression unreadable but far from warm. She hadn't said a word, just looked at me with those flat eyes and followed him to their car. I pushed the memory away, stood up from the couch where I'd worn a depression into the cushions over the past months, and headed for the shower. My son had called. My son wanted me there. Maybe family could heal after all. Maybe I'd been too rigid, too much the auditor, and not enough the father. By 6 o'clock, I was dressed in a clean blue button-down Sarah had bought me years ago, keys in hand, wallet in my back pocket. The garage smelled like concrete dust and old motor oil. Tools I barely knew how to use hung on a pegboard my neighbor had helped me install. I climbed into my 2019 Honda Accord, reliable, practical, the kind of car a retired auditor drives. I turned the key. The starter cranked, strong and normal sounding, turning over like it always did, but the engine didn't catch. I tried again, pumping the gas pedal. Same result. The dashboard lit up perfectly. Battery fine. Fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. I popped the hood, stared at the engine like it might explain itself to me. Nothing looked obviously wrong, but then again, I'd never been good with mechanical things. Numbers, budgets, spreadsheets, those I understood. Engines were a foreign language. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Glenn." "Dad, we're waiting. Don't be late." Frustration crawled up my spine like something with claws. I didn't want to disappoint him. Not now. Not when we were finally reconnecting after 3 months of silence that had felt like 3 years. I called a tow service, gave them the address, and paced my driveway while the dispatcher promised 20 minutes. The asphalt was cracked under my feet. spiderwebs of damage spreading, something else I'd been meaning to fix since Sarah died, but never got around to. Everything around me was slowly falling apart. Another text buzzed. "Everything's ready." I typed out an explanation about the car, deleted it because it sounded like an excuse, typed it again. My hands were shaking slightly, a tremor I'd noticed more lately. Age, probably. Stress. When the tow truck finally arrived 40 minutes later, I climbed into the cab and gave the driver directions to Werner's Auto Repair, the only place I knew that might still be open this time of evening. "Happens sometimes with these newer cars," the driver said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. He had a round face, friendly. "All those sensors and computers and emissions equipment. One little thing goes wrong, whole system shuts down. Werner's good, though. He'll figure it out quick." "I hope so," I said, staring out the window as my neighborhood slid past. The houses I'd watched families grow up in, the street where I'd taught Glenn to ride a bike. I really need to get somewhere tonight. It's important. The whole time, riding in that truck with my Honda hooked up behind us like a corpse being dragged, one thought circled through my head on an endless loop, a 3-month silence broken by a dinner invitation. I should be skeptical, but I'm not. I'm just tired of being alone in this house where every room reminds me of Sarah, tired of wondering if I was too hard on him, if I should have just given him the money and not asked questions. He's my son, my only child, the only family I have left in this world. If he's reaching out, I have to reach back. I have to believe there's still something worth saving between us. The tow truck pulled into Werner's Auto Repair at 7 o'clock exactly. Lights blazed inside the shop, harsh and industrial. A man in grease-stained coveralls was wiping his hands on a red rag, watching us pull in. The driver released my Honda from the flatbed with a mechanical groan and the screech of metal on metal. I climbed down from the cab, my knees protesting after sitting, and approached the mechanic. "Joe Werner? I called about my car. It's urgent. I need to get somewhere tonight. My son's expecting me." Joe nodded slowly, studying the Honda. "Let me get it up on the lift. Take a proper look." He gestured toward a scuffed door. "There's coffee in the waiting room if you want. Might be old, but it's hot. Won't take long." The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and rubber. Cracked plastic chairs lined one wall. Through a scratched window, I could see Joe positioning my car on the lift. I sat down and pulled out my phone. 7:23. "Glenn. Dad, where are you?" 5 minutes later. "The food's getting cold. Then we're waiting for you." Each message felt more insistent, demanding. I typed apologies, tried to explain. My fingers felt thick on the screen. 25 minutes crawled by. I watched Joe work beneath the lift, methodical and focused. Then he straightened fast, and even through the window, I could see something was wrong. The color had drained from his face. He stood there staring at something under my car, then walked toward the waiting room. When he pushed through the door, his hands were trembling. "Mr. Gray," his voice was strained, "you need to see this. Right now." I followed him into the shop. The overhead lights were harsh, making everything look exposed. Joe pointed his flashlight at the brake lines. Even I could see it. A clean cut. Deliberate. Not wear or damage. Someone had sliced through the line. "Someone did this," Joe said quietly. "This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted you to crash. To die." He moved the beam to the engine sensor. "They sabotaged this too. The engine would have started eventually, gotten you a few miles down the road. Then it would have failed on the highway when you were doing 60, 70. And when you hit the brakes." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out with numb fingers. "Glenn, Dad, hurry." The words stared back at me. Hurry to what? Hurry to die on Route 309 with no brakes? A memory surfaced sharp. Sunday night, 2:30 in the morning. A sound from the garage, metallic scraping. I'd lain there listening, decided it was nothing. Cats. Wind. But Glenn had a spare key. Glenn knew I kept the car in the garage. Glenn... The shop tilted. I steadied myself against the fender, breathed through my nose. 30 years of auditing kicked in, keeping my face neutral when discovering fraud. This was just another form of theft. Someone trying to steal my life. "Joe, I need you to document everything," I said steadily. "Photographs of both sabotage points. Written report. Don't touch anything else. Leave it exactly as you found it." Joe stared at me. Mr. Gray, we need to call the police. This is attempted murder. Whoever did this. I know what it is, I interrupted quietly, and I will handle it. But first, complete documentation. You know who has access to your garage? Joe's voice grew careful, suspicious. Who'd want you dead? Can you keep the car here overnight? Don't repair anything. Just photograph it, document it. I walked outside into the cool March air. The parking lot was empty. I paced, letting the cold clear my head. Through the window, I could see Joe photographing everything, writing notes. My phone buzzed again. Glenn. Dad, hurry. I stared at the message for 5 minutes. $35,000. That's what he'd asked for 3 months ago. I'd said no. Was that when he decided? Or earlier, when Sarah died and he realized he wasn't inheriting yet because I was still alive? How long has my son been planning to kill his own father? I typed. Mechanical problems. Won't make it tonight. Sorry. His response came within seconds. When can you come? That speed told me everything. He was waiting. They were both waiting at that table, wondering why their plan had failed. I'll let you know. Joe emerged with printed photographs and handwritten notes. What do you want me to do with this? I took the documentation, folded it into my jacket pocket. The paper crinkled against my chest. I need to rent a car. Anywhere nearby still open? He gave me an Enterprise address 3 blocks away. I opened my rideshare app. 8:05. 6 minutes away. The phone buzzed once more. Glenn. Dad? My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could see it all now. The whole picture an auditor should have spotted. The invitation wasn't reconciliation. It was an execution. Get me in the car. Get me on the highway. Let the sabotage work. An accident. A tragedy. They'd inherit everything. House, savings, life insurance. Clean and simple. I closed the app without responding. The rideshare was 2 minutes away. I had somewhere to go, someone to see. Glenn was going to wait, just like I'd waited 3 months for a phone call I should never have answered. Just like he'd been waiting for me to die on the highway tonight. But I wasn't dead, and now I knew exactly who'd tried to kill me. The documentation felt heavy in my pocket as headlights swept across the parking lot. My ride had arrived. I climbed into the back seat, gave the driver the rental car address, and stared out the window at the passing streetlights. My reflection looked back at me, a 63-year-old man who'd just discovered his son wanted him dead. The auditor in me was already working, cataloging evidence, building a case. But underneath that professional calm, something else was growing, something cold and patient, something that knew how to wait, how to plan, how to find the weak spots in someone's defenses. Glenn had made a mistake tonight. He'd failed to kill me, and now I had time to think, time to plan, time to make sure he paid for what he'd tried to do. The rideshare dropped me at Enterprise Rent-A-Car 3 blocks from Werner's shop. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while a young clerk processed my license and credit card, barely glancing up from her screen. 20 minutes later, I sat behind the wheel of a silver Toyota Camry that smelled like fake pine and strangers. My phone lay on the passenger seat, screen dark. Glenn's messages sat there unread, unanswered, burning like accusations I wasn't ready to face. I pulled onto the main road heading north. Lansdale was 30 minutes away through suburban sprawl and traffic lights. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was working overtime, running calculations the way it had for 40 years in government audit offices. Motive clear. My estate was worth over $600,000. The house in Chestnut Hill appraised at $480,000 last year. Savings accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policy for $100,000 I'd kept since Glenn was born. All of it flowing to him when I died. Except I wasn't supposed to die, of old age. I was supposed to die Monday night on Route 309, when my brakes failed at 60 miles per hour. Means equally clear. Glenn had the spare key to my house. I'd given it to him years ago when I still trusted him, back when he was someone who'd check on me if I didn't answer the phone. He knew my schedule, knew I kept the car in the garage, knew that side door latch had been broken since winter. Opportunity? This past weekend. Saturday I was at the grocery store for 2 hours. Sunday morning at the farmer's market. Either time he could have slipped in, done the work, slipped out. The metallic scraping at 2:30. Sunday morning, that must have been him leaving, closing the door too hard, making noise he thought I wouldn't hear. The pieces aligned with mathematical precision. Every data point fit. A traffic light turned red. I stopped, stared at it without really seeing the color. 3 months ago, that argument in my kitchen wasn't just about money. It was a threat I'd been too stupid or too hopeful to recognize. Glenn's voice echoed in my memory, louder now. "You're sitting on a pile of money while I'm drowning in debt." The kitchen table jumping under his fist. And behind him, Maud with her arms crossed and her face carved from ice. No attempt to calm him down, no mediation, just cold calculation in those flat eyes. Then Glenn's parting words. "It'll all be ours eventually anyway. Not mine. Ours. Present tense, not future. Not talking about inheritance decades away. Talking about this week, this month." I'd heard it then, but filtered it through a father's assumptions. I should have been listening like an auditor. Lansdale streets were quiet when I arrived just after 9. Modest two-story homes from the 80s lined both sides, most with their lights dimmed for the night. I found Glenn's house halfway down Maple Street, every window blazing like it was on display. I parked around the corner where I could see their living room, but they couldn't spot the car. Pulled out the small notebook I'd carried for 30 years, flipped to a clean page, noted the time. Old habits. Through the window, Glenn paced back and forth, phone pressed against his ear. Maud stood by the dining table, gesturing sharply. Even from here, I could read the frustration in her posture. Quick movements, pointing at him at the phone, shaking her head. I adjusted the rearview mirror, settled in to watch. My phone stayed in my pocket. 20 minutes passed. The scene inside didn't change much. Glenn checking his phone obsessively, Maud growing more agitated. But it was what I didn't see that confirmed everything. No dinner on the dining table. No pot roast. No little potatoes. No reconciliation meal. Instead, papers were spread across the surface in neat stacks. Even from outside, I recognized the format. Legal-sized documents, multiple pages, the kind I'd reviewed thousands of times. Estate paperwork, property transfer documents. They weren't preparing dinner. They were preparing to inherit. The meal was fiction. The forms were ready and waiting for news of my death. I took photos through the window with my phone. Evidence, documentation, the auditor's instinct to record everything. Glenn checked his phone again, showed the screen to Maud. She threw up her hands, said something sharp. He responded, defensive. They were waiting for a call, from police, from a hospital, from someone reporting an accident. They were waiting for confirmation their plan had worked. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to balance a checkbook. The man I'd helped through college, through his wedding, through the early years when money was tight. And he'd stood in my garage 2 nights ago with a blade in his hand, methodically cutting through brake lines while I slept upstairs. Not in rage, not in passion. With premeditation and paperwork. The man I'd raised didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never had. I wrote in my notebook. 8:47 p.m. Glenn pacing, phone active. Maud controlling, frustrated. Papers on table. Legal documents, estate transfer format. No dinner preparations, expecting notification of death. Professional detachment. That's what got me through 40 years of finding embezzlement, fraud, theft. You can't let emotion cloud the evidence. The numbers tell the story. The timeline reveals the truth. Subject demonstrated clear motive, means, and opportunity. Evidence supports premeditated attempt on target's life. Subject poses continued threat to target's safety and assets. Recommendation: protective action required. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb without turning on headlights until I'd rounded the corner. Already thinking strategically. Already covering my tracks. The highway back to Chestnut Hills stretched empty under sodium lights. I drove exactly the speed limit, signaled every lane change, hands steady despite everything. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen without picking it up. Glenn, "Dad, are you okay? I'm worried. Please respond." Worried. The word sat in the car like poison gas. I took the exit toward home, toward the house with the garage where Glenn had stood, with hatred and a cutting tool, severing more than brake lines. The phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't look. I had work to do. Planning, preparation, strategy. My son wanted to play games with inheritance? Fine. But I'd written the rules for 40 years, and I was about to teach him exactly what happens when you try to defraud an auditor. My house stood dark when I pulled into the driveway near 10. I sat in the rental car for a long moment, staring at the structure I'd called home for 30 years. The garage where Glenn had betrayed me, the back porch where I'd pushed his tire swing, the second-floor window of his childhood bedroom. All of it felt contaminated now. I got out, locked the car, entered through the front door, didn't turn on lights, walked through darkness to the kitchen, and sat at the table where Glenn's fist had made the salt shaker dance 3 months ago. Then I began to think. Hours crawled by. I filled notebook pages with analysis, columns of assets, vulnerabilities, required actions, drew lines connecting concepts, circled keywords. This was what I'd done for 4 decades. Trace the money, find the weakness, build the case. By dawn, I had a framework. By 7 Tuesday morning, I had a plan. I showered, put on a clean shirt and slacks. Armor for the day ahead. Then I picked up my phone. Glenn had sent 12 messages overnight, each more concerned sounding than the last. "Dad, please answer. I'm really worried. Should I come check on you?" I crafted my response with surgical precision. "Sorry, son. Car broke down seriously. Had to leave it at the shop. Reschedule dinner?" 3 dots appeared immediately. He'd been waiting, watching his phone. "Of course, Dad. Main thing is you're okay." I read it twice, heard the falseness like a wrong note. Main thing is you're okay. "No, Glenn. The main thing was supposed to be that I was dead on Route 309 with failed brakes, but I'm still breathing, and now you're scrambling." At 9, I sat in attorney Mark Davidis's office downtown. He was 44, sharp-eyed, with framed degrees covering one wall. His reputation for handling complex estate cases was why I'd chosen him. I didn't mention attempted murder, not yet. Just asked about changing a will, Pennsylvania inheritance law, disinheriting beneficiaries. Davis explained the process, made notes, then looked up. "Pretty straightforward, Mr. Gray. You can disinherit anyone if you make your intentions clear in the document. But families can challenge." "What if the person I'm disinheriting tried to hurt me?" I interrupted quietly. "To gain the inheritance faster?" His pen stopped moving. "That's a different conversation, Mr. Gray. That's a very different conversation. Pennsylvania law is clear on this. If someone attempts to harm you for financial gain, they're automatically disqualified from inheritance. And we're talking serious felony charges, 10 to 20 years. "I need options," I said. "Legal options, before I make formal accusations." He studied my face. "How certain are you?" "Gathering evidence now." The police station came next. Detective Rodriguez was mid-40s with tired eyes and coffee stains on his tie. I presented Joe Werner's photos, his written statement, my timeline documentation. Rodriguez listened, took notes, but his expression stayed cautious. "Mr. Gray, I understand this is frightening, but without proof of who accessed your garage, who actually did the cutting, do you have security cameras? Witnesses?" "No." He sighed. "We'll open a report. Send an officer to document the vehicle. But I'm being honest. Without more evidence, this is property damage. Maybe attempted vehicular manslaughter if we can connect someone. Do you have suspicions?" I met his eyes. "I need to be certain before I accuse anyone. But I'm working on that." Evening found me on my back porch, exhausted but too wired to rest. Movement caught my attention. My neighbor, Barbara Clark, approaching through the dusk with 2 mugs in her hands. She was 61, silver-haired, with gentle features but intelligent eyes I'd never really noticed before. "I saw your lights on all night," she said without preamble. "You've been gone all day. Sylvester, what's wrong?" Something in her directness broke through my defenses. I told her, carefully watching for judgment. She set down her tea. 4 years ago, my daughter tried to have me declared incompetent, wanted my house, my savings, said I was senile, dangerous to myself, had doctors lined up, paperwork ready. Her eyes met mine. "I understand what you're feeling. The betrayal, the disbelief that your own child could—" She didn't finish, didn't need to. "When my daughter did what she did," Barbara continued, "I wanted to pretend it wasn't happening, wanted to believe she was just misguided, not malicious." She leaned forward. "But Sylvester, when someone shows you who they are, believe them, especially family. They know exactly what they're doing. He's my only child, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. How do I? You protect yourself, and you make sure he faces consequences, or he'll try again. The words hung between us in the cooling air. I spent 40 years exposing fraud, I said finally, following money trails, finding truth in numbers. But I never thought, he's my son. I changed his diapers, taught him to ride a bike, and now I'm building a case against him like he's just another file number. Barbara took my hand. He stopped being just your son when he cut those brake lines. You're not betraying him. He betrayed you. Remember that. Midnight approached. Barbara stood to leave, paused at the porch steps. I know what the next few days will be like. The doubt, the second-guessing, wondering if you're overreacting. She turned back. You're not. Trust your instincts. Trust the evidence. And if you need anything, someone to talk to, someone to remind you why you're doing this, I'm 3 houses down, anytime. I watched her disappear into darkness, a small figure carrying more strength than I'd imagined. My phone buzzed. Glenn, Dad, when should we reschedule? Really want to see you. I typed, I'll let you know. I have some things to take care of first. His response was immediate. Like what? Like protecting myself from you, like changing my will, like making sure you never get a penny of what you tried to kill me for. But I wrote, just personal business. Talk soon. I turned off the phone completely. Inside, I climbed stairs to my bedroom for the first time in 36 hours. The notebook sat on my nightstand, open to tomorrow's page. 3 items in careful print. 1. Change locks. 2. Security cameras. 3. New will. Disinherit Glenn. Reason stated clearly. I closed my eyes. Sleep came finally, dreamless and dark. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected clarity. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, the first real sleep I'd had since Monday night. The notebook still sat on my nightstand, action items staring back like a mission briefing. I showered, dressed, made coffee. My phone sat on the counter where I'd left it powered off. When I turned it on, 3 messages appeared. Glenn sent an hour ago, Dad, you there? I took a sip of coffee, made him wait. Power comes from patience. The phone rang mid-morning. Glenn's voice came through warm, concerned. So perfectly performed, I almost admired it. Dad, how about we have that dinner tomorrow? Thursday? Maud and I really want to see you. I kept my tone light. Tomorrow's tough, son. How about Friday? That gives me time to sort out this car situation. I heard something in his voice then. Eagerness edged with desperation. Friday works. Friday's perfect. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. Playing the oblivious father was harder than expected, but necessary. Barbara arrived late morning, and we drove together to Mark Davis's office. This time the conversation was different. Davis spread papers across his mahogany desk. Will templates, inheritance law summaries, criminal statutes. If we're doing this, he said, looking between us, we need to be thorough. Changing the will protects your assets. But if Glenn tries again, we need evidence for criminal charges. Barbara leaned forward. I used to work with private investigators when I practiced family law. We could install security cameras in Sylvester's garage. If Glenn tries to access it again... Davis nodded slowly. That would give us attempted burglary at minimum, conspiracy to commit murder if we can prove intent. I signed the new will paperwork with firm strokes. Everything to Montgomery County Children's Hospital Foundation. Glenn gets $1. The reason stated simply, for causes known to my son. Afternoon brought Carlos Mendoza, a private investigator Barbara knew. He was 48, quiet, carried a black equipment bag. In my garage, he installed 2 HD cameras, one above the main door, one covering the workbench where my Honda now sat, returned from Werner's shop. Motion activated, Mendoza explained. Infrared for night vision. Cloud storage so footage can't be destroyed. If someone comes in here, we'll have video, timestamps, everything. 3 hours. Cost $1,200. I wrote the check without hesitation. Cheaper than a funeral. A locksmith arrived next, changed all my locks. Front, back, garage side entrance. New keys, new deadbolts. $380. The physical security mattered, but the message I sent next carried real weight. I texted Glenn. Son, I found that spare key you left here years ago. Want me to return it? Three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Glenn was struggling with his response. Finally, no, Dad. You keep it. I smiled grimly. He knew the spare key was how he'd gotten in Sunday night. Knew I'd just told him I'd discovered the access point. Now he knew I was paying attention, even if he didn't realize how much. Evening settled soft and warm. Barbara invited me to her porch. We sat in wooden chairs that creaked comfortably, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Barbara reached over and took my hand. Her palm was warm, slightly rough from gardening. "You're not alone in this," she said quietly. I looked at our joined hands, mine weathered and spotted with age, hers smaller but equally marked by years. "I haven't felt this connected to another person in a long time," I admitted. "Since before my wife passed. I thought that part of life was over." Barbara squeezed gently. "Maybe it's just beginning again, in the worst circumstances, but beginning nonetheless." We sat like that as darkness completed its arrival, two people who'd been betrayed by their children, finding unexpected comfort in each other. The stars multiplied overhead. Barbara's porch light was off, giving us privacy. A dog barked once down the street, then quieted. I became aware of the warmth of her hand, the subtle scent of lavender soap, the comfortable weight of her presence. "I should go," I said, not moving. "Let you get some rest." She turned to look at me, face barely visible in starlight. "Or you could stay a bit longer. I'm not tired." Neither was I. Tired of fighting, maybe. Tired of being alone, certainly, but not sleepy. We remained seated as the night deepened. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to her front gate. "Friday," she said, "when you go to that dinner with Glenn, be careful. The cameras are running. The will has changed. I'll be fine." She touched my arm. I wasn't talking about physical safety. I meant emotionally. Facing him, pretending everything's normal. That's going to be harder than you think. She was right. I knew she was right. But Friday was coming whether I was ready or not. Thursday morning brought official confirmation. Mark Davis called at 9:30. "It's done," he said without preamble. "Your new will is executed, notarized, and registered. I've placed a copy in my office safe, and I'm sending another to your bank's safe deposit box today." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something shift inside. Not quite peace, but a kind of structural security, like a building finally bolted to its foundation. "Thank you, Mark. One more thing. The will explicitly states the disinheritance reason, for causes known to my son. When this comes out, and it will eventually, that phrase tells the world you had specific reasons. It protects against challenges." After the call ended, I poured a second cup of coffee and considered my next move. Late morning, I called Glenn, kept my tone casual, rambling, the way an older man might talk about mundane worries. "Son, I've been thinking. This house is getting too much for me. Too many rooms, too much yard work. I met with a financial advisor yesterday about selling, maybe moving into one of those nice senior living communities. Activities, maintenance included." Glenn interrupted, voice tight. "Dad, why would you sell? The house is beautiful. It's your home." I continued as if I hadn't heard the tension. "I could get maybe $450 for it, possibly $500 if the market's good. That would let me live comfortably, maybe take some trips. Europe, Alaska. I've always wanted to travel." I heard him breathing on the other end, could almost feel the panic transmitting through the line. "We should talk about this," Glenn said carefully. "At dinner tomorrow, before you make any decisions." Perfect. That evening my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, and Maud's voice came through. The first time she'd called me directly in months. Her tone dripped artificial sweetness. "Sylvester, Glenn mentioned you're thinking of selling the house. I wanted to reach out. You know I work in real estate. I could handle the sale for you, get you the absolute best price. Family discount on commission, of course." I played along, elderly and trusting. "That's kind of you, Maud. I'll certainly consider it." She pushed. "These senior communities, they can be expensive. You want to make sure you're not depleting your savings too quickly. Maybe we could sit down, look at your finances together." There it was. She wanted to see my complete financial picture. Wanted to know how much they were losing by my continued survival. I'll think about it, I said mildly. Talk to you tomorrow at dinner. When I hung up, I was smiling, not with warmth, but with grim satisfaction. Afternoon brought a courier to my door. Registered mail from Davis's office, copies of the new will, notarized certificates, registration confirmation. I read through them carefully. Every paragraph reinforced the same message. Glenn receives $1, the rest to charity. Reason stated for legal protection. I drove to my bank, placed the documents in my safe deposit box alongside Sarah's jewelry and the house deed. The vault was cool, quiet, secure. When the metal door clicked shut, I felt the satisfaction of a strategic position fortified. That evening, I explained the day's events to Barbara over tea at my kitchen table. She listened with the careful attention of someone who understands legal maneuvering. "Maud called you directly," she said, stirring honey into her cup. "That's desperation. They know something's changed, but they don't know what. They're scrambling?" I nodded. "Tomorrow's dinner is going to be interesting." Barbara set down her spoon, looked at me seriously. "Can you do it? Sit across from them, eat their food, make small talk, knowing what you know?" I met her gaze. I sat through 40 years of meetings with people who'd embezzled pension funds, stolen from retirees. I smiled, shook hands, asked about their families while building cases against them. I can handle dinner with my son. We moved to preparing dinner together. Simple pasta, salad, a bottle of red wine Barbara brought. The domesticity felt strange and natural at once. Barbara stirred sauce while I chopped vegetables. Our shoulders brushed as we passed. Conversation flowed easily. Memories of better times. Careful sharing of pain. Moments of genuine laughter. After dinner, as we cleaned dishes side by side at the sink, Barbara turned to me. "Thank you," she said softly, "for letting me be part of this. I know you could have faced it alone." I set down the dish towel. I'm glad I didn't. We were close, the air between us charged with something neither of us had felt in years. I leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, tentative, carrying both sadness and hope. Two people who'd been wounded, finding comfort in each other. When we parted, Barbara's eyes were bright. "Well," she said with a small smile, "that happened." I touched her face gently. "Is it okay that it happened?" "More than okay," she whispered. We stood at my front door later, Barbara preparing to walk home. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of early spring growth. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I confirmed. "Dinner with Glenn and Maud. I'll play the concerned, slightly confused elderly father. They'll try to assess whether I'm really selling the house." Barbara touched my chest lightly, over my heart. "And you'll be gathering evidence, watching their reactions, building your case." I covered her hand with mine. "This is who I am. Was. The investigator." "Maybe," she said. "You just needed the right case. The important one." She rose on her toes, kissed me briefly. "Call me when you get home tomorrow night. Or come by. Whatever you need." After she left, I stood in my doorway, watching her porch light come on 3 houses down. My phone buzzed. "Glenn." "Looking forward to tomorrow, Dad. We have a lot to discuss." I typed back. "Me too, son. Me too." I meant it differently than he thought. He wanted to discuss money, manipulation, control. I wanted to watch them squirm, to gather evidence, to see exactly how far they'll go. Tomorrow night would tell me everything I needed to know. I locked my door, new locks, new keys, and walked through my house, checking the security camera feed on my phone. The garage cameras showed empty space, waiting. Everything was ready. The trap was set. Now I just had to walk into theirs without getting caught. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. I spent the day in careful preparation, not physical, but mental, reviewing notes from the week, cut break lines, Glenn's panicked texts, Maud's transparent call. By late afternoon, I was dressed in slacks and a button-down, the uniform of a trusting father. Barbara appeared at my door just before I left. "Remember," she said, touching my arm, "you're gathering information, not confronting them. Not yet." I nodded, kissed her cheek. "I'll call you after." The drive to Lansdale took 30 minutes. With each mile, I put on my mask. The slightly confused, slightly lonely elderly father who trusts his son. Glenn opened the door before I could knock. He'd been watching. Dad, great to see you. The hug was too tight, held too long. Over his shoulder, Maud stood in the hallway, smile bright and cold as chrome. When I mentioned I was still driving the rental because my Honda needed something complicated with the engine and brakes, I caught it. The briefest exchange of glances between them. Recognition, tension, fear. We sat at the dining table. The same table that held estate documents earlier this week now displayed careful domesticity. Pot roast, roasted vegetables, red wine. Maud served with practiced efficiency. I remember you love pot roast, Sylvester. She hadn't called me by my first name in years. The performance was transparent once you knew to look for it. Glenn played the attentive son, refilling my water glass, asking about my week. The conversation was surreal. 3 people eating a meal, 2 plotting murder while pretending normalcy, 1 pretending not to know. I played my part perfectly. The rambling older man, grateful for family attention, a little lonely, a little naive. Midway through the main course, I deployed my weapon. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the house. It's really too much for me now. I spoke with a real estate agent. They think I could get $480,000, maybe more. After taxes, about $455,000 clean. They froze. Maud's knuckles whitened around her fork. Glenn's smile became strained. I'm thinking of buying a small condo, maybe $200,000, and using the rest to travel. Europe, Paris, Rome, maybe Alaska too. The atmosphere shifted like air pressure dropping before a storm. Maud recovered first. Sylvester, that's a big decision. You shouldn't rush into anything. Glenn added, voice tight. Dad, the house is your life, your memories. You shouldn't sell. I continued, as if oblivious. Oh, and I was at my lawyer's office this week, too. Just updating some documents. You know, at my age, you have to think about these things. I said it casually, between bites. The reaction was immediate. Another desperate look between them. What kind of documents? Maud asked, trying to sound merely curious. I waved a hand vaguely. Estate planning things, boring legal stuff. My lawyer said it's important to keep everything current. I didn't elaborate. Let them imagine. Wonder. Panic. The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. Dessert was rushed. Coffee declined. Glenn and Maud were barely maintaining their facades now. When I stood to leave, claiming early fatigue, the relief in their faces was palpable. Drive safe, Dad, Glenn said. We'll talk soon about the house, before you do anything. In the rental car, I watched them in my rearview mirror. The moment my car turned the corner, they rushed back inside. I could imagine the conversation, panicked, angry, desperate. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and called Barbara. It's done, I said. They're terrified. Her voice came through warm and worried. Are you okay? I considered. I'm not sure, but I'm in control. That's what matters. She was quiet for a moment. Be careful. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. I knew. I was counting on it. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and replayed conversations. Glenn's too tight hug, Maud's forced warmth, the way they both tensed when I mentioned the lawyer. When I pulled into my driveway, my phone showed 2 missed calls from Glenn. No voicemail, just silence and need. I didn't call back. Instead, I walked through my house. New locks, securing every entrance, security cameras recording every angle of my garage. The screens on my phone showed empty frames, my Honda sitting untouched, bait waiting. I texted Barbara, home safe, they're scrambling. I could see it in their eyes. Her response was immediate. Coming over. By the time she arrived 10 minutes later, I was sitting at my kitchen table with the lights off, staring at nothing. She didn't turn on the lights, just sat beside me in the darkness, took my hand. Tell me, she said quietly. And I did, not the strategic details, but the human cost. I looked at my son tonight and saw a stranger, worse than a stranger, an enemy. My voice cracked slightly. When did I lose him, Barbara? When did he stop being my child and become this? She squeezed my hand. You didn't lose him. He chose a path. That's not on you. We sat in the darkness, 2 people who'd survived betrayal by their children, holding each other's pain. Outside, night settled deep. Somewhere Glenn and Maud were plotting their next move, and I, despite the ache in my chest, was ready. Saturday unfolded with careful normalcy. I woke beside Barbara. She'd stayed the night, both of us needing the comfort of not being alone. We shared coffee in morning sunlight, talked about nothing important, let ordinary routine provide shelter from the storm building around us. By early afternoon, Barbara returned to her house. I decided on a grocery run, milk, bread, the weekly basics that continue regardless of family betrayals and murder plots. The store was crowded with weekend shoppers. I moved through aisles on autopilot, mind elsewhere, replaying Friday's dinner. When I turned onto my street with grocery bags in the passenger seat, I saw it immediately. Glenn's car in my driveway. He stood at my front door, shifting his weight, checking his phone, radiating nervous energy. When I pulled in, his head snapped up. "Dad, we need to talk." Not a greeting, a demand. I took my time gathering grocery bags, using the moments to prepare. My heart rate elevated, but my hands stayed steady. "Of course, son. Come inside." I unlocked the door, new locks, new keys Glenn doesn't have, and we entered. The house felt different with him in it now, contaminated by his presence. I set groceries on the kitchen counter. Didn't offer coffee or a seat. Waited. Glenn paced the living room. Couldn't stand still. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said. About selling the house." I remained neutral. "Yes?" His voice rose. "This house, it's not just yours. It's family. It should stay in the family. Mom lived here. I grew up here. You can't just sell it to strangers." I felt the calculated manipulation, the appeal to sentiment. "It's my house, Glenn. I can do what I want with it." His control began slipping. "But what about me? What about your family? Don't I matter?" The entitlement in his voice was naked now, undisguised. "Of course you matter. But I don't understand why you're so concerned about what I do with my own property." Glenn stopped pacing, faced me directly. His face was flushed, jaw clenched. "Because it should be mine. I'm your son. I have a right to it." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. I went very still. "A right? To property I own? To money I earned?" Glenn realized he'd said too much, but couldn't stop now. "I'm drowning in debt, Dad. $75,000. Maud and I, we can't... We need..." He caught himself, tried to recover. "We just think you should keep the house. For the family. For memories." But then, fatally, if everything had just gone according to plan. He stopped. His face went pale. The words trailed into silence. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "If what had gone according to plan, Glenn?" The question sat between us like a live grenade. Glenn backed toward the door. "Nothing. I just meant..." I stepped forward. "You meant if I'd driven my car last Monday, if the brakes had failed on the highway, if I'd died in the accident you arranged." His face drained of all color. "You're not..." He couldn't form coherent words. "Get out," I said, voice like ice. Glenn fumbled for the doorknob, escaped into the afternoon sunlight. His car peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing. I stood in my doorway, watching until the car disappeared, then closed and locked the door. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Called Detective Rodriguez. He admitted it. Not directly, but enough. If everything had gone according to plan, he was talking about my death. Rodriguez's voice was sharp, alert. "Did you record it?" I closed my eyes. "No, I wasn't expecting him to show up." Rodriguez sighed. "It's something, but not enough for arrest. We need more." After hanging up, I called Barbara. She arrived within minutes, found me sitting on my couch, trembling, not from fear, but from the emotional earthquake of hearing my own son essentially confirm he tried to commit murder. Barbara pulled me into her arms. "You're doing the right thing," she murmured. "He made his choice, not you." We sat like that for a long time, me finally allowing the tears I'd held back all week, Barbara holding me through it, saying nothing, just being present. Evening settled over the house. Barbara had made tea neither of us drinks. We sat close on the couch, her arm around my shoulders, my head leaning against hers. "What happens now?" she asked. My voice was rough from crying. "We wait. Rodriguez has his verbal slip on record, but it's not enough for arrest. We need more." Barbara shifted to look at me. "The camera's in the garage. If Glenn tries again..." "If he tries again," I finished, "we'll have him on video. And this time, I'll make sure it's enough to put him away." My phone buzzed on the coffee table. We both looked at it. Glenn's name on the screen. I picked it up, read the message aloud. Dad, I'm sorry about today. I'm just worried about you. I care about you. Barbara made a sound of disgust. I stared at the words. He actually thinks I still believe him. After what he said. After what he did. I typed a response with deliberate slowness. We'll talk later. I need time to think. Sent it. Set down the phone. You're not going to confront him? Barbara asked. Not yet, I said. Not until I have everything I need. He's going to try again. I know it. And when he does, I'll be ready. Outside, darkness was complete. The security cameras in my garage recorded empty space, waiting. The trap was set. The bait was placed. Now came the hardest part. Patience. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive quiet. I woke early, the house silent except for the refrigerator's hum and distant birdsong. Barbara had stayed over. We'd fallen into an unspoken pattern where neither of us wanted to be alone overnight. She was making coffee when my phone rang. Detective Rodriguez's name on the screen. My stomach tightened. Mr. Gray, his voice came through, sharp with controlled excitement. The camera's caught something. You need to come to the station. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. When? Last night, early this morning, technically. Around 3:20 a.m. Barbara reached across the table, took my free hand. I squeezed back. I'm on my way. In Rodriguez's office, Barbara and I watched security footage on a monitor. The timestamp read 03:20 a.m. The garage camera showed darkness. Then motion-activated recording began. The side door opened. The lock, visibly damaged, forced entry. A figure entered, immediately recognizable. Glenn. Dark clothes, carrying a small toolbox. He approached the Honda, set down his tools, opened the driver's side door. His hand reached toward the steering column, then froze. Glenn's head turned, slowly scanning the garage. He couldn't see the hidden cameras, but something had alerted him. Instinct, paranoia, the subtle hum of electronic equipment. He stood perfectly still for nearly a minute, then abruptly closed the car door, grabbed his tools, and exited quickly. Never touched the brake system, but the intent was crystal clear. Rodriguez stopped the playback. We have breaking and entering. We have him inside your garage with tools, approaching your vehicle, the same vehicle that was previously sabotaged. Combined with the mechanic's documentation of the original brake line cutting, his verbal admission yesterday about if everything had gone according to plan, and the financial motive, he looked at me directly. This is enough for an arrest warrant, attempted murder, breaking and entering, possibly conspiracy if we can tie his wife to it. But I need to ask you directly, are you prepared to press charges against your son? Once we do this, there's no going back. I sat in silence, staring at the frozen image on screen. Glenn's face caught in harsh infrared light, expression tense and guilty. Barbara's hand was warm in mine. I thought about Glenn as a child, learning to ride a bike, graduating high school, getting married. Then I thought about cut brake lines, about sitting at dinner Friday pretending not to know my son wants me dead, about the $75,000 in debt that somehow became more important than a father's life. Yes, I said finally, voice steady. I'm ready to press charges. Rodriguez nodded, picked up his phone. I'll get the warrant. Early afternoon, Rodriguez called. We picked him up at his workplace. He's in custody. I was back home, Barbara beside me on the couch. I expected to feel satisfaction, vindication, something. Instead, there was just hollowness. What happens now? Arraignment Monday. Given the severity, attempted murder of a family member, bail will be set high, if granted at all. His lawyer will probably push for a plea deal. After hanging up, I sat motionless. Barbara asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Maud's voice exploded through the speaker. You had him arrested. Your own son. What kind of father are you? Her voice was shrill, borderline hysterical. Years of careful manipulation stripped away, leaving raw fury. He tried to kill me, Maud. Twice. It's on video. She didn't address this. You're destroying his life. Our life. Over what? Money? Because he asked for help? My voice dropped to ice. He cut my brake lines. He broke into my garage with tools to do it again. The police have evidence. You want advice? Get a good lawyer. For yourself, too, if you were involved. I ended the call. Block both numbers. Barbara watched me, said nothing. We moved to the back porch, sat in the late afternoon light. She took my hand. I finally exhaled properly for the first time in a week. The sun set in shades of orange and pink, unseasonably warm for early March. We sat without speaking, watching light fade from the sky. My phone lay on the small table between our chairs, silent now, both Glenn's and Maud's numbers blocked, that chapter forcibly closed. Barbara broke the silence softly. Tomorrow you'll have to testify at the arraignment. Are you ready? I considered. I don't know if anyone's ever ready to testify against their own child, but I'll do it. I'll tell the truth. She nodded, didn't push. Somewhere in the city, Glenn sat in a holding cell, beginning to understand consequences. Somewhere else, Maud was probably calling lawyers, calculating her exit strategy, planning how to distance herself from her imprisoned husband. But here, on this porch, I felt something I hadn't felt since Monday evening when my car wouldn't start. Peace. Not happiness, the wound was too fresh for that, but peace. The knowledge that I was safe, that justice was moving forward, that I didn't have to look over my shoulder anymore. Barbara stood, offered her hand. Come inside. I'll make dinner. Something simple. I took her hand, let her pull me to my feet. Through the window, I could see my kitchen. Warm light, familiar space, now shared with someone who understands betrayal and survived it. Who's teaching me that survival isn't just about safety, but about choosing to live fully after nearly losing everything. We walked inside together, leaving the darkening evening behind, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. The week following Glenn's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Monday's arraignment. Glenn entered the courtroom in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. Wouldn't meet my eyes. Bail denied due to severity and flight risk. His court-appointed attorney immediately began negotiating. By Wednesday, a plea deal was offered. I met with the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, who laid out the options. First-degree attempted murder carries 20 years. But proving premeditation to a jury is uncertain, even with your evidence. Your son's attorney is pushing for a deal. Assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, plus breaking and entering. 6 years total. Eligible for parole in 4 with good behavior. She watched my face. It's your call. We can take it to trial if you want. I thought about months of testimony, reliving everything publicly. Thought about Barbara, about moving forward. Take the deal, I said. 6 years is enough. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, fluorescent lit. I sat in the gallery, Barbara beside me, her hand in mine. The prosecutor presented the plea agreement. Glenn stood before the judge, shoulders slumped, diminished. The judge asked, Mr. Gray, do you understand you're pleading guilty to assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm and breaking and entering? Glenn's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. And you understand the sentence is 6 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 4 years? Yes. The judge signed the paperwork. So ordered. That was it? 2 minutes to conclude a relationship that spanned 35 years. Before the bailiffs led Glenn out, he turned. His eyes finally found mine in the gallery. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other across the courtroom's divide. I saw no anger in Glenn's face, no defiance. Just emptiness. And maybe, underneath that emptiness, something that might be belated understanding. Glenn's mouth moved. I'm sorry. The words were quiet enough that only those nearby heard them. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement that the words were spoken. Then Glenn was led away through the side door, and he was gone. Outside the courtroom, the prosecutor pulled me aside. We couldn't build a case against the wife. No evidence she directly participated. She's filed for divorce, already moving to another state, essentially abandoning him. I wasn't surprised. Maud was always about money, about advancement. A husband in prison served neither purpose. Will she try to contact me? The prosecutor shook her head. Restraining order is still in effect. She knows to stay away. One more loose end tied off. One more threat neutralized. 1 month later, April sunshine warmed the park by the lake. Barbara and I walked the path around the water, fingers intertwined. She'd moved in permanently, her house sold, belongings merged with mine. The combined household felt right, natural, like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. We were planning a summer wedding. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and Barbara's sister. The ceremony would be in her friend's garden, intimate and genuine. I'd changed my will a third time, half to Montgomery County Children's Hospital Foundation, half to Barbara. The house that Glenn wanted so desperately now belonged to a man who'd learned to share it, to fill it with laughter and music and life instead of lonely silence. Back home that evening, I found an envelope in the mailbox. Prison postmark, Glenn's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment, then carried it inside. Barbara saw it, asked no questions. At the kitchen table, I held the unopened letter. He wrote me. Barbara set down her tea. Do you want to read it? I turned the envelope in my hands. Not now, maybe someday, but not today. I opened a kitchen drawer, placed the letter inside, closed it. Today is for living. For us. For the future. Barbara smiled, took my hand across the table. Then let's go for that walk we planned. The evening's beautiful. We left the house hand in hand. Two people in our 60s who'd survived our children's worst betrayals and found unexpected second chances at love and trust. The letter sat in the drawer, waiting for a day that may or may not come. But today life called louder than the past. The park path wound through newly budding trees, the lake reflecting sunset colors like melted copper. Other couples walked past, some young, some old, all absorbed in their own worlds. Barbara and I moved at an easy pace, no rush, nowhere to be except here. Do you think about him? Barbara asked after a comfortable silence. I considered. Sometimes. Mostly I wonder when it changed, when he stopped being my son and became someone who could do that. I squeezed her hand. But thinking about it doesn't change anything. He made his choices. Now he lives with them. Barbara nodded. And you? What are you living with? I stopped walking, turned to face her fully. The setting sun lit her silver hair, her face open and kind. I'm living with you, with the possibility of happiness I thought I'd lost forever, with the understanding that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the person who stands beside you when everything falls apart. She rose on her toes, kissed me gently. Good answer. We continued our walk, circling back toward home as twilight deepened. In the kitchen drawer, Glenn's letter sat unopened, its words frozen in time, waiting for a moment that may never arrive. But out here in the living world, I walked hand in hand with Barbara Clark, two people who'd earned their second chance through survival and courage, and the willingness to trust again. The house ahead showed lights in the windows, our home now, filled with shared meals and conversation and the quiet comfort of companionship. Justice had been served. Safety had been secured, and most importantly, improbably, life had become worth living again. Not despite the betrayal, but because I chose to survive it, to fight back with truth and law, rather than bitterness, and to accept love when it appeared in the aftermath. The evening air carried the scent of spring flowers. Somewhere a bird called its final notes before nightfall. And I, Sylvester Gray, 63 years old, retired auditor, survivor of my son's murder attempt, walked toward home with the woman I love, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.